The alarm hit before I even understood what was happening. Red light flooded the docking corridor, and every guard around Empress Veseru turned rigid, weapons rising in perfect unison, scanning a threat that had not yet shown its face. I was standing 11 feet away, exactly where the markers on the floor told me to stand. Every human on this station knew those markers. Cross them, and you would be on the ground before you took a second step. Nobody touched her. Nobody even got close enough to feel her shadow. That was the rule, older than any treaty between our two peoples. My name is Callum Bright, and I was only there to fix a translation relay that kept glitching during trade talks. I was not a soldier. I was not important. I was the guy who crawled under control panels and reset burnt wiring, and I had absolutely no business being anywhere near the most guarded being in known space. But the ceiling above her had just cracked. I saw it before her guards did, a support strut, damaged from the earlier tremor that everyone had brushed off as harmless station settling, gave way with a groan that sounded almost alive. A section of reinforced plating, heavy enough to crush bone into powder, broke loose directly above her. Her guards were fast. I want to be clear about that, because what happened next was not about them being weak or slow in any normal sense. Their kind, the Threnai, had reflexes measured in fractions most human minds cannot process. But they were built on protocol. Every motion they made was drawn from a doctrine, a decision tree, a lifetime of training that told them exactly how to respond to a blade, a gun, a bomb. None of that training accounted for falling debris directly above their empress with less than a second to react, because no one had ever needed to plan for it. She was untouchable. Nothing was supposed to get close enough to threaten her, not even physics. I did not think. I did not calculate odds or consequences, or the fact that I was about to break a law that carried an execution sentence. My body simply moved, the way it does when a cup falls off a table and your hand shoots out before your brain even registers the danger. I crossed the 11 feet in what felt like no time at all. I grabbed her by the shoulder and pulled her sideways with everything I had, throwing both of us out from under the falling plate. We hit the floor hard, my arm taking most of the impact, and the metal came down exactly where she had been standing a heartbeat earlier. The sound was enormous, a deep metallic boom that rattled through the corridor and left dust hanging in the red emergency light. For a moment, nobody moved. Not her guards, not the other diplomats pressed against the walls, not even me. Then the guards reacted, and their reaction was aimed at me. 6 of them surrounded us instantly, their weapons trained on my head, close enough that I could feel the heat coming off the charged barrels. I understood, in that frozen second, exactly what I had done. I had touched her. I had crossed the marked line, put my hands on her body, forced her to the ground without permission, without ceremony, without anything resembling the ritual distance her culture demanded. By their law, I had assaulted their empress. A voice cut through the tension before a single shot could be fired. It was hers. "Stand down." 2 words, spoken low and even, but every guard obeyed instantly, weapons lowering, though their eyes stayed locked on me, like they expected me to lunge at any second. I was still on the floor, one arm underneath her shoulder where I had pulled her clear, and I realized with a strange, distant clarity that I was still touching her, and none of her guards had moved to separate us. She turned her head, and for the first time since I had arrived on this station 3 months earlier, Empress Veseru looked directly into my eyes. Her people had 4 eyes, arranged in pairs, dark and reflective like polished stone, and all 4 were fixed on me, with an expression I had never seen on her face during any of the formal meetings I had glimpsed from a distance. It was not anger, it was something closer to disbelief. "You touched me," she said. Her translator implant rendered it in flat, careful English, but the weight behind the words came through anyway. I let go of her shoulder immediately, scrambling back a step, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought the guards could probably hear it. "The ceiling was falling," I said. "I am sorry. I did not think. I just moved." "You did not think?" she repeated, as if testing the shape of the sentence. "No, ma'am. There was not time to think." One of her guards, a tall Threnai with pale markings down the side of his face, stepped forward and spoke rapidly in their own language, gesturing at me with clear hostility. I did not need the translator to understand the tone. He wanted me removed, or worse. Veseru raised a hand, and he stopped mid-sentence, falling silent instantly. She rose to her feet on her own, brushing dust from her robes, and looked down at the crushed plating where she had been standing only moments before. Then she looked back at me. "Explain to me," she said, "why you would risk execution for a being you do not know, who has never spoken a single word to you, who you were forbidden to even approach." I swallowed hard, trying to find an answer that made sense even to myself. "Where I come from," I said slowly, "if you see someone about to get hurt, you do not stop to ask permission to help them, you just help. I did not think about who you were. I only saw someone standing under something that was about to kill them." Her guards muttered among themselves, low and uneasy. I got the impression that this idea, the idea of acting without calculation, without protocol, without weighing status and consequence first, was almost incomprehensible to them. Veseru studied me for a long moment. The silence stretched long enough that I became aware of the ringing in my ears from the crash, the smell of scorched metal, the trembling in my own hands that I had not noticed until now. "Take him into custody," one of the guards finally said, switching to English, likely for my benefit, so I would understand exactly what was coming. "He violated the boundary. The law is clear regardless of intent." "No," Veseru said. The guard turned to her, clearly startled. "Empress, the law exists to protect you. If we allow this violation to go unanswered, it sets a precedent that anyone may—" "He saved my life," Veseru said, cutting him off. Her voice did not rise, but something in it made the guard go quiet immediately. "Your law was written to prevent assassins from reaching me. It was never written to prevent a stranger from pulling me out from under a falling ceiling. If your protocols cannot tell the difference, then the flaw is in the protocol, not in him." I stood there, still shaking slightly, unsure whether I was about to be dragged away anyway, or whether I had somehow just survived the worst mistake of my life. She stepped closer to me, closer than I had ever seen anyone stand to her, closer than the guards seemed comfortable allowing even now. I could see fine details in her face I had never noticed from a distance. Faint markings along her jaw that shimmered faintly under the emergency lighting, still tinted red from the alarm that had not yet been called off. "What is your name?" she asked. "Callum," I said. "Callum Bright. Callum Bright," she repeated, as if memorizing it. "Do you understand what you have done today?" "I think I got in trouble," I said, which was probably not the smartest thing to say to an empress, but the adrenaline had stripped away most of my filter. Something flickered across her face that might have been amusement, though it was hard to tell with a species whose expressions did not map neatly onto human ones. "You are the first being outside my own guard, and outside my own family, who has ever placed a hand on me without invitation, ceremony, or permission," she said. "In 300 years, no one has dared, not out of fear of punishment alone, but because the idea itself does not occur to most beings who understand what I am." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She turned to the guard who had wanted me arrested. "Clear the corridor. Get engineers here to secure that strut before it drops the rest of the ceiling on someone, and stand down the response teams before they storm this hallway thinking I am under attack." The guard hesitated only a second before obeying, barking orders into his comm unit. Other Threnai began moving, some toward the wreckage, some toward the corridor entrances to hold back the security teams that were undoubtedly already rushing this way after the alarm. Veseru remained where she was, still closer to me than protocol should have allowed, watching the guard walk away before turning her attention back to me. "Walk with me," she said. I blinked. "I am sorry, what?" "Walk with me," she repeated. "There is a viewing chamber, 2 corridors from here. I would like to speak with you somewhere that is not filled with dust and broken metal, and Threnai, who are currently deciding whether they still trust their own training." I glanced at the remaining guards, half expecting one of them to physically block me from moving. None of them did, though their eyes tracked me the entire way, wary and unreadable. We walked together down the corridor, her pace unhurried despite what had just happened, and I found myself falling into step beside her, still absorbing the fact that I was alive, uninjured beyond a bruised arm, and apparently now walking alongside the single most powerful and protected being on this station. The viewing chamber was quiet when we reached it. A wide window looking out over the slow-turning curve of the station and the stars beyond it. The guards took positions outside the door rather than inside, which I suspected was as close to privacy as she ever got. She stood at the window for a moment before speaking again. My people built these protocols generations ago, after an assassination attempt nearly ended our entire line of succession, she said. Since then, every empress has lived behind walls of guards and markers and distance. We are protected so thoroughly that we are also isolated completely. I have shaken hands in ceremony. I have been bowed to by thousands, but I cannot remember the last time another living being touched me the way you did today, without calculation, without agenda, simply because they saw danger and moved to stop it. I shifted uncomfortably. I really was not trying to make some kind of statement. I just reacted. That is exactly why it mattered, she said, turning to face me. If you had planned it, if you had approached me with some scheme in mind, my guards would have detected the hesitation, the calculation, the tell in your body that comes before a planned action. That is what they are trained to watch for. But you gave them nothing to detect, because there was nothing calculated in what you did. You simply acted. That is the one thing my guards, for all their skill, cannot predict or defend against, because it is not born of intention, it is born of instinct. I thought about that for a moment, about the 11 feet I had crossed without a single conscious thought, about how strange it felt to hear someone describe pure panic as something rare and precious. Where I come from, I said carefully, we do not really think of it as special. Most people would have done the same thing. Then your people are either very brave or very reckless, she said, and there was no insult in it, only something that sounded almost like wonder. Maybe both, I admitted. She studied me again, longer this time, and I had the strange sensation of being truly seen, not as a technician, not as a translator's assistant, not as one more anonymous human moving through the station's corridors, but as an individual person who had done something that mattered. I will not forget this, she said finally, and I do not intend to let my guards forget it either. Their protocols nearly cost me my life today, not because they failed to protect me from an enemy, but because they were never designed to allow anyone to protect me at all. That will change. I was not sure what to say to that, so I only nodded, still feeling like I might wake up at any moment and find myself back under the control panel with the broken relay, none of this having actually happened. You may return to your work, she said, though there was something in her tone that suggested this was not really a dismissal so much as a formality. But I would like to speak with you again, Callum Bright. There are not many beings in this galaxy who have earned the right to stand this close to me. I find I am curious what else you might do without thinking. I managed something close to a smile, still shaky from everything that had happened. I will try to stay out of trouble until then. Do not, she said. Trouble seems to suit you. I left the viewing chamber with my legs still unsteady, walking past guards who watched me differently now, not with open hostility, but with something more like reassessment, like they were rewriting an internal file that had, until an hour ago, listed humans as an unpredictable variable to be tolerated rather than understood. I did not know it then, standing in that corridor with dust still on my sleeves and my heart finally starting to slow down, but that single moment, 11 feet crossed without thought, would end up changing far more than my own small place on that station. Word of what happened spread quickly among both the Threnai and the human delegations, and within days, people were speaking not just of an accident narrowly avoided, but of the untouchable empress who had let a stranger touch her and lived to tell of it. For the Threnai, it became a question that shook the foundations of centuries of doctrine, a debate over whether true protection could ever come from protocol alone, or whether it also required something that could not be trained, something that lived in the instinct of beings who had never needed walls of ceremony to know when to act. For me, it was simpler than any of that. I had seen someone in danger, and I had moved, that was all. But standing in that corridor, watching the guards who had been ready to kill me an hour earlier, now stepping aside to let me pass, I understood that sometimes the smallest, most unthinking act of instinct can mean more than a lifetime of careful, calculated protection ever could. And somewhere behind me, in a quiet viewing chamber overlooking the stars, The Empress, who had been untouchable for 300 years, stood a little closer to the window than protocol would ever have allowed, thinking, perhaps for the first time, about what it meant to finally be reached.